please stay unmute, and when we call you, you can unmute your cell phone or.
Okay, I'll do that.
Thank you. Bom dia a todos. É com imensa satisfação que começamos mais uma live do LIDE Rio Grande do Sul. Dessa vez é a nossa quinta edição do LIDE Talks, com a parceria da Federação Israelita do Rio Grande do Sul. E hoje receberemos o Dr. Claudio Lottenberg, presidente do Conselho da Sociedade Beneficente Israelita Brasileira Albert Einstein, e presidente nacional do Comitê de Gestão do LIDE Rio Grande do Sul. I would like to welcome the teachers, Mr. Arnon Afek and Mrs. Michal Beeri, and also thank them for having accepted the invitation to be with us today and to talk about the good practice that are being implemented in Israel to resolve the impacts of the pandemic COVID-19. Eles vão falar em, o professor Arnon e a professora Michal vão falar em inglês, então eu oriento a todos participantes para manterem as suas câmeras desligadas, assim como seus microfones. Essa é uma live que está sendo gravada, ok? A apresentação de cada debatedor terá 15 minutos e todas as perguntas elas podem ser encaminhadas aos palestrantes ao final das apresentações. Eu também quero dar as boas-vindas ao ministro Luiz Fernando Furlan, chairman e presidente do Conselho do LIDE Nacional, e também ao Dr. Flávio Vieira, presidente do Comitê de Saúde do LIDE Rio Grande do Sul. Passo a palavra de pronto agora ao presidente da Federação Israelita do Rio Grande do Sul, Sebastian Wattenberg.
Boa tarde a todos. Queria agradecer inicialmente ao LIDE por ter se juntado a nós mais uma vez numa iniciativa dessa natureza, super importante o tema. Penso que a experiência de Israel é bastante rica, né? Tem muito a nos ensinar, é um país que enfrentou e está enfrentando com bastante sucesso e reconhecimento a questão da pandemia. Agradecer aos nossos convidados pelo aceite do convite, ao Dr. Claudio Lottenberg também, nosso amigo, mais uma vez atendendo prontamente aos nossos chamados. Thank you, Professor Arnon, for being here with us today, and also Yoel and Yair from the SHEBA Hospital, e Michal também, que eu descobri agora há pouco, que na verdade é uma carioca, né, que está em Israel muito bem representando o nosso país nessa instituição mais importante. Então, agradeço a todos pela presença e um bom evento a todos.
Fábio, pode fazer. Passa a palavra já ao Fábio, que vai fazer a mediação e a condução dos debates.
I will speak in English for the sake of everybody understanding. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining this great LIDE meeting. I thank all the attendants and thank LIDE for the great opportunity. I am the Director of Advocacy of the Federação Israelita, and it's a great pleasure to bring together these two renowned institutions. SHEBA, it's a worldwide benchmark. It's between the 10 greatest hospitals according to Newsweek. And Albert Einstein, we all know the great reputation. And the aim of this panel is to expose to all the audience the strategies that were taken, the innovation, and the learnings that, especially in Israel, that we are in the stage of learning We have learnings to teach us and their perspectives in the fight against the COVID. So we start, the panelists will speak 15 minutes exposition, and then we have a panel for questions from the audience. So we start with Professor Afek. Thank you very much, Professor Afek.
Thank you very much as well. Do you hear me?
Perfect.
Good. So, boa tarde, if I said right in Portuguese. Unfortunately, I don't speak, although I visited a few times your beautiful country. I'm well aware of the wonderful and prestigious hospital in São Paulo, Albert Einstein. We also had the opportunity to have more than one of our fellows doing fellowship there and returning back to Israel. So thank you very much for the collaboration. We appreciate it. I will start by reviewing the general effort of the Israeli government in order to control the COVID-19 epidemics. I had in my past, before coming to SHEBA, I was the Director General of the Ministry of Health and was asked by the Director General who took my place, Moshe Bar Simantov, to be part of the team that tried to explain to the public of Israel what the ministry is doing. So I was very close to what was done there and very proud of what these people did. And by the way, the fact that we took the team to explain to the public and to convince them in the importance of the steps, although they were quite severe steps taken by the Ministry of Health, I think was a very important part of our success in the first battle. And I stress the first battle against COVID-19. Well, Israel once heard of the beginning, or what we thought was the beginning of the COVID-19 in Wuhan and Hubei, took a very important measures at a very, very quickly. What we did was first close our border. Although we are part of the Middle East, we are still geopolitically an isolated area. It's like an island. It's a geopolitical island. So it was very, very easy for us to close our borders, both the borders with Jordan, Egypt, but also the air border of Israel, and put all the people who returned from first the East and afterwards from Europe, put them into quarantine of 14 days. So it allowed us to control very, very quickly. Israel was the first country to ban flights from in the entire Far East. So it was very easy for us relatively to close our borders and to control the epidemic within Israel. We use this time gained in order to prepare our healthcare system. Israel has a public healthcare system. We have public insurance for all the people of Israel, and they are entitled to a very, very good and high-level quality of care in public hospitals, very important community healthcare, one of the strongest in the world. And in fact, in 2012, the OECD said that Israel has created one of the most enviable healthcare systems among OECD countries. So because of the structure, we used the time in order to prepare ourselves to the epidemic. Unfortunately, as every public healthcare system in the world, we do not have enough beds. We have not enough medical staff, not enough ICU beds. So what we did in this time gain is we started to prepare ourselves. SHEBA Medical Center is Israel's largest hospital. We have 1,800 beds, more than 9,000 employees, out of which 1,600 are physicians and more than 3,000 nurses. We, in fact, apart from liver transplant, we do all the rest of the things. We have more than 11,000 births a year, more than 50,000 operations. including transplant programs. And because of the importance of our hospital being the biggest and the most prestigious in Israel, the government of Israel asked us to prepare ourselves for this event. So we started by building a designated department. Israel, because of the precaution taken, even the patients who returned from the Princess Diamond were put into quarantine for the first 14 days. And they stayed with quarantine with us, so it allowed us to practice how we protect our staff, how we prepare this specific department for their treatment. Afterwards, we started to receive patients and again treat them. Once we realized the nature of the COVID-19 and the fact that, of course, the majority of patients, more than 85% of them, received the disease, some even asymptomatically, the other in a very light, mild form, but there are around 5%, especially the elderly, who get a very, very, I would say, nasty disease. I use the word nasty. It might be a very severe disease. So once we realized that it will not be enough for us, just a regular department with 4 beds of, I would say, augmented care, we built a whole intensive care unit. We called it Corona Intensive Care Unit. In Hebrew, it's called TANK, but what we did, we transformed one of our parking lots into a 93-bed intensive care unit department. Afterwards, we continue our preparation. We also realized that there is a huge need for patients with psychiatric disease, mental health disorders for their own department. So we opened, I think, one of the first, to my knowledge, in fact, even maybe in the world, a department of 16 beds designated for patients with psychiatric disease and corona. We opened also a hemodialysis designated for these patients in one of our departments. Once we realized we'll be needing more, we transformed a whole building into Corona Hospital, which can carry like 6 different departments. I'll return in a few seconds to explain which department we use. And also transformed another parking lot into hospitalization wards. All included, we built more than 600 new beds in SHEBA Medical Center. All of them was done in a very, very rapid time, something less than a week. And this is due to one of the strengths of our people, I think, our logistic department. And I, again, realized what I knew from my hospital, that the head of the logistics and the fact that you have a very good logistic department is vital for your different efforts. We also divided our emergency room into a different emergency room designated for corona patient, another one for regular patient. And we put the entire patients who had even suspicion into a separate ward. So we tried to keep the area of the hospital designated for regular patient, normal patient, I would say, outside of corona. It wasn't very successful all the time. We had 2 or 3 events in which unfortunately, there were corona patients who even were negative at the beginning in swab taken at the ER, became after positive and infected our staff, but still relatively we were able to separate the 2 identities. We did the same thing with our maternity ward. I told you we have more than 11,000 births a year, so it was vital for us to do a separate place for women with corona and who are supposed to give birth, also with operating room for cesarean section. And in fact, we had one of the patients who arrived to us was a young woman, about, I think she was less than 30. She gave a birth to a kid, and the child was perfect, but she was very, very sick. So we even put her on ECMO at our Corona intensive care unit. Luckily, afterwards, she survived, and now she is well, and she is into what we call the rehabilitation. We have a specific Corona ventilatory rehabilitation. And one of the lessons we learned is the importance of rehabilitation, because patients after Corona, even not ventilated patients, are extremely wasted, because sometimes the ventilation or the severe cases can last for even 4 weeks of ventilation. Sometimes they are put on ECMO and then taken off the ECMO and continued their treatment. I had the opportunity to speak of one of our physicians who got Corona, and he told me that he practically, and he had a mild to moderate disease, not more than that. He was never ventilated. I'll speak in a few seconds about the treatment we gave him. But anyway, he recovered, and he was so weak. He told me, I have to learn to walk. And in order to practice my lung and respiratory, I started singing. But luckily, I was alone at my house, so nobody had to hear me singing. This was part of his rehabilitation. We designated a specific operating room, and regarding sick kids, which were not that many, what we did is we took care of them in a regular ward, and we brought staff from our pediatric hospital, the Edmund and Lily Safra Pediatric Hospital, to the regular department of Corona, internal medicine C, and they treated the patient, what we normally do not do. And we had all these, I think, ideas. For example, once we had a kid whose mother was negative, and she volunteered to be with him together. So we built an old caravan just for them, because we thought it was not ethical to her to be exposed to other patients, Corona positive, apart than from her own kid. Regarding the different treatment we use, we collected plasma from patients who healed or became negative after we were sick, and we gave the plasma to our patients. We gave remdesivir to our patient, all part of international clinical trials we ran. We gave also plaquenil to our patients, not with a great success, I must say, and Kevzara and Actemra, which are drugs against IL-6. I can't say that we have something very, very positive regarding the treatments, but we thought we must try as part of clinical IRB Helsinki approved clinical trials, and we did that. But the most important lesson I learned is the need for qualified medical staff. In order to take care of these Corona patients, you need large number of qualified staff who know how to ventilate, to take care of ICU patients, and they are very, very severe ICU patients. We use our internal medicine wards as a basis, and we took staff from our intensive care unit and in order to help them in their treatment. When we prepare ourselves now for the next winter, what we learned is the importance of the medical staff and the fact that we have to train them and to have more departments of internal medicine and more ICU bed. We do not have enough of these in Israel. We have overrated occupancy, and the thinking of the next future or the winter, which might have within us both Corona and influenza, I think it's practically a nightmare for us. So I think that the best lesson I can tell is use the time once you take a control over the epidemic, and what's happened now in Israel. We have now left, we took care at the height of the epidemic of something like 150 patients. We have now something almost 500 patients we took care overall throughout the epidemic. in intubated patients or severely sick patients, we got up to 35 of them. We had 3 or 4 ECMO simultaneously being done here, being done in SHEBA. And we also, again, to protect our staff, we started working in teams of nurses and physicians who do not meet each other and went to Zoom meetings and did all these changes in order to protect our staff. Generally, it was very successful. By the way, the staff who took care of the corona patients were not infected. The ones who unfortunately got infected were staff who met patients at the internal medicine ward, and they were not aware that they're corona positive, although they should have treated them under certain protection, or bone marrow transplantation unit in which one of the visitors. So we limited the number of visitors to our patient, again, in order to control to epidemic. So if I want to sum up what we did, Israel reacted very, very quickly, gained time, and the curve of the epidemic slowed down tremendously. We used this time to prepare our entire healthcare system. Because of the lack of beds and the lack of staff, we used this time both to prepare our staff and to build new and very important beds. And the procurement of medical equipment was done by the Israeli security forces from all over the world. I didn't mention, but we also opened the lab for the virology lab in our hospital. We didn't have until that lab. We used the government lab, what we thought independence in lab testing was extremely important to us. And we built a whole array of services in order to protect our staff and to differentiate between the regular patient and the corona patients in order to treat both of these two groups in a very, very safe way. Overall, we have been able to control the epidemics, and now it's our time to prepare ourselves to the winter, which I'm afraid might be a very, very important, I would say, challenge to our entire healthcare system. And it might be, and I hope I'm mistaken, I really hope that I'm mistaken, that what we have seen till now will be nothing compared to the winter. But again, I hope I'll be mistaken, as I said. That's my 15 minutes.
Great. Thank you very much, Professor Afek. It was a great exposition. I am following very, very closely what SHEBA is doing, and it makes us very proud. We'll talk further, some questions and some other additional points. Now, I want to introduce my colleague, ophthalmologist, Dr. Claudio Lottenberg. It's a great pleasure to share with us, to share with the panelists also from about the great experience from Albert Einstein. This is also, as SHEBA in Israel, Albert Einstein is a benchmark here in Brazil as a worldwide benchmark as well. Thank you, Dr. Claudio. Please.
Okay. We have to fix and put the mic to work. I'm very happy to be here with you, my good friend Sebastian, also with Fabio, who is also close to my family and close to his family, very nice person, his father. So I'm happy to share some information regarding the situation in our country, in Brazil, and some points regarding our hospital. First of all, I would like to say that we have a big challenge in this country since we decided to build the most important universal system that has been built all over the world. It's not that simple to lead a system that has to be worked under the social skills that we have. We have almost 160 million people that are served by what we call Sistema Único de Saúde, SUS. Besides that, we have a private sector. What is important, because if we did not have this private sector, probably we would have much less resources to work with the whole population. And maybe because of the system, and we have in this system almost 46,000 interfaces with the population, we are able to have some specific skills in way to manage the situation under the coronavirus. It's a difficult situation because the lack of resources that we have here, they are observed all over the world. And we have to combine two important points. The first is trying to flatten the curve in a way that the patients are not going to look for the system all of them together. And besides that, we can work trying to isolate the people, what means that we're going to diminish how it's going to be less transmissible. What I could observe in Brazil during this time, positively. I don't want to discuss about political issues, because if I start like this, probably people from Israel, they're going to become jealous after 3 elections to put a prime minister. But we have problems here in the same way. The first point is that the medical societies, they have been working all together, and they were able to establish important protocols and to align specific conditions in a way to deliver the best care as is possible. We were really enthusiastic because we could see, even though we had the pressure according to some solutions like chloroquine, the science among doctors and among those that are close to the patients were much more stronger than the conditions of the pressure of the politicians. The second positive point is that we could observe in our country that we have a stronger partnership. We have private companies that are fully interested about taking part in some decisions. I think this is important because public policies are things that we not do just by governments, but the involvement of the society is something very important. And the society is quite oriented in a way to find solutions in initiatives like testing, like delivering food, like delivering medications, preparing medical facilities. And this is something that, in my point of view, is very important, mainly on healthcare. We could observe also something positive in terms of new fast tracks that were established in terms of regulation. This is something that chronically in our country is very bad. When we talk about Anvisa and also ANS, we have something that is important to have the agencies, but they have been frozen all the market for many years. And we need something like this to see these agencies finally understand that they cannot stop the system. We saw also a lot of innovation. I know that you guys from Israel, you work a lot with telemedicine, something that we had a lot of resistance of doctors here. In a way to put everybody in the same page, United States, telemedicine was regulated in 1996. In United Kingdom, it was in 1998. And even Angola is updated, is upfront of us. And because of this chaotic situation, at least for this purpose, we were allowed to use telemedicine as something that can help us to get close to our patients. I just hope that people are not going to return and to come back and to stop once again something that should be in a different speed in our country. And another point that I want to share with you is that by the first time we have a country, and I used to say that we have many Brasis inside of one Brazil. So we cannot be absolutely sure about some behaviors because the realities are completely different. If you observe what is going to happen and what is happening in Manaus, in Recife, in Ceará, Fortaleza, and you compare to something that is happening in Curitiba, it's a completely different situation. And at this time, what I could see is that we have much more connectivity in terms of data, what means that we are really worried about working with real and good quality in terms of information. What is going to change in a long term? This country, as many countries, we have built our system according to a center that is oriented to hospitals. And probably because of everything that we could observe and some kind of threat that the patients are going to have, this movement is going to change completely the orientation of the system. We're going to have much more ambulatory procedures. You're going to have much more patients that are going to look for telemedicine, what means that many things that we are doing inside of hospitals, and they are wasting a lot of resources, they're going to start to happen outside of the hospital. What is the problem in the country is people, they are not able to understand that all the society, they are involved with the same concerns. This is not just a healthcare system problem. This is not just an economic problem. Both problems, they are important to all of us. Doctors, they are really concerned what is going to be important in terms of the economy. And those that are running the economy, they are really worried about the destination of the human beings. And I don't understand why it's not possible to align the speech between the different levels of the government, what means federal, governments of state, and of the municipalities. I see that we are not able to build a good system in terms of governance that could align general roles to the country and specific roles to the cities and to the states, and they have very specific problems that could be resolved in different terms according to their priorities. So this misunderstanding is creating a misunderstanding by the population. When the moment that you see that the president doesn't accept this problem as a real problem, he says that's a simple flu. So he goes outside, he's without masks, he's not taking care of himself, he's stimulating people to be all together. And in the moment that people are observing this kind of behavior, they understand that they can do the same. So in a moment that we do not have vaccine and we do not have medications, and what we have are masks and how to use alcohol gel and isolation, is difficult when you have somebody who has an important presence that demonstrates exactly the opposite. I do not think how long it's going to take. We have different curves in our country. São Paulo has started with the AAA population. Today we have people that used to live inside of slums. In the interior part of the country, I think that the project, the process is still starting. So I don't think if you're going to check the numbers in the country that we're going to see good numbers so fast, because probably when things are going to become better in São Paulo, they're going to become worse inside of the country. What means that we have to be very careful about how we check all this data. We have to be very careful how we take our conclusions, because all these movements, they have to be very coordinated to the day after. We have here in our hospital a very good intensive care unit. The average time that people are spending inside of our intensive care unit is about 10 days, which is very good compared to the international literature. We had just one person who passed away inside of our hospital. The same is not happening in our public hospitals. Probably because these people, they are coming to our hospitals a little bit later. What means that the time when you decide to admit patients is a very important reference in terms of prognosis. We are involved in terms of research. Please do not ask me about chloroquine. We have many discussions regarding this. And we have also an interesting experience in terms of telemedicine. Today, Albert Einstein is working with more than 1 million people that are related to the SUS. What means that these people, they have an opportunity of not having to be present in hospitals before becoming really sick to be admitted. One of the points that we are discussing is how to establish a single line to admit patients inside of the intensive care units. I think this is not so simple because this is not a logistic system. It's something that we have to consider according to complexity, according to ethical skills. So it's not just establish a line, but more than that, to organize the system in a way to deliver for those that are going to have prognosis because of this movement. And with these words, I think that we have, and it's important for us to leave some legacy about this experience. We thought that life and healthcare would be and would follow to one line, and probably many of our expectations are not going to happen like this. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Claudio. Great talk. And one of the legacies is about leadership. It's amazing the difference between the results when we have great leadership and less good leadership, let's say. And that's why we brought so great leaders like you, Professor Afek, Claudio, and Professor Michal. Now I would like to introduce Professor Michal Beeri. She's a fellow Brazilian. It makes us very proud to have such successful Brazilians abroad. And she's the director of the Joseph Sagol Center of Neuroscience Research. And as we know, the COVID, the most severe patients are people, elderly people. And Professor Michal has a great experience with elderly people. She can tell us SHEBA's experience with this subset, this population. Also some innovations that are taking place in her institute and in Israel. Thank you, Professor Michal.
Obrigada pela introdução. E eu sou realmente carioca da gema e orgulhosa de ser brasileira em Israel, em SHEBA. Eu vou fazer minha apresentação em inglês, porque fica mais fácil para mim também falar de coisa profissional em inglês, mas também para os meus colegas de Israel poderem entender, apesar do prazer de falar português com sotaque quase gaúcho. So I'm going to move to English. My expertise is not COVID-19, it's actually Alzheimer's disease. And I thought that for the last 15 minutes, I'll introduce to you a little bit of what we know, which is very little, I have to admit, about COVID-19 and Alzheimer's disease. And then I'll just take off from COVID-19 just a bit to tell you what we're doing in SHEBA in terms of diagnostic processes and potentially treatment processes in this devastating disease, despite the fact that indeed COVID-19 really washed any interest in other topics at this time of humanity. So I searched PubMed, which is the medical field, let's say, library, to see, and I put the words Alzheimer's and COVID. And I was surprised and somewhat to the bad to discover that only 9 papers showed up. And then I searched and I read all of them to see if any of them has any data on Alzheimer's disease and COVID-19, and the answer is 0. There is yet nothing that has been published in the medical literature that connects between the two diseases. It wouldn't be surprising that Alzheimer's disease patients have greater mortality from the disease, both because they are elderly and because they have a condition that might be affecting their immune system, their capacity to protect themselves from the disease. The papers, all the papers that are, or those 9 papers are all about case studies and how they dealt with them in particular situations such as behavioral disturbances, isolating an Alzheimer's disease patient and explaining again and again that there is something called COVID that they will not remember, and keep asking again and again why they can't go out or why they can't move, why they can get out to the garden is something almost impossible. So I believe that in the coming months, we will see substantial literature of how to deal with older adults that have neurodegeneration and dementia in a crisis like the one that we're going through now. So I'd like to move on, if okay with the audience, to tell you more about the positive side. Those who are aware, Alzheimer's disease is a deadly disease, is a decline in cognitive functions that gets worse and worse over time until the person becomes completely dependent and eventually dies. For those who have family members with the disease, and unfortunately it's so prevalent that I believe that most of you know someone with Alzheimer's disease, the feel is that the body stays and the mind goes, right? The person is not there, but the body stays. Today, there are 4 medications approved for this disease. They are not good medications. They have very little effect, and the effect is temporary, does not change the course of the disease. They do help a little bit in a proportion of in a portion of the patients. New medications that have been tried in the last decade, a full decade, have failed. And this is where we in SHEBA are trying to piggyback. We're trying to understand what are the main reasons for our failure in finding new medications for Alzheimer's disease. And we're taking advantage of 2 pathways. One of them is the very early diagnostic pathway, and the other one is on what we call system biology, and I'll try to explain it very briefly in a minute. The idea is that one of the reasons that the clinical trials, those new medications, might be failing is that the pathology, what grows in the brain of those who are developing the disease, grows there 20 to 30 years before you see any clinical symptom. So we're seeing patients who are 40, 45 years old to whom we image the brain, and we can see the pathology of Alzheimer's disease there. They're completely functional, and yet they are developing pathology that reflects evolving disease. And they'll see the symptoms when they're 70 and 75. The disease prevalence goes exponentially up with age, and in fact, on those above the age of 85 in Brazil, in Israel, in China, or anywhere else in the world, it's about 50% prevalence of the disease. So if you take 100 people who are 85 and 86 years old, 50 of them will have some kind of dementia, particularly Alzheimer's disease. So this is an epidemic of another kind. What we're doing in SHEBA is to try to understand and use the advantages of Israel in terms of digital technologies in particular and technologies in general to assess the disease very, very early in its course, okay? So if we say that the pathology already shows up at the age of 40 and 45, when we test people with the tests that we have today, we won't see anything. So we're now using, and again, taking advantage of Israel being the startup country, and SHEBA has I have to say, admittedly, an incredible infrastructure to absorb new technologies. So we're using new technology through cell phones, and now we have been funded by the Bill Gates Foundation, for example, to test a new technology that is using retinal imaging. The retina seems to reflect a lot of what is happening in the brain, and I understand there are a few ophthalmologists in the audience, so that's fun to say. In any case, we're looking at different very sensitive technologies, or some that we have to prove that are sensitive, to be able to assess the disease very, very early in its course, okay? When there is a beginning of pathology, or maybe not even pathology, but very mild biological changes that are telling us that that person will develop the disease in the future if nothing is done. And at this point, people come back and ask, wait, if there is no medication, then what's the point to know that I'm going to get sick in 20 years, right? And it's a very good question. There are many reasons to do it anyway, but for this short conversation that we're having now, the most important point to transfer is that you cannot develop an effective medication for the earliest phases of the disease if you don't know how those very early phases look like, all right? So if you're gonna change a biology, if you're gonna change something in the blood, if you're gonna change something in the immune system, you need to be able to measure what is that you're changing. And this is why those two things have to go together all the time. So as I said, on the diagnostic side, in SHEBA, we're taking advantage of the novel technologies in Israel that it's like boom, 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 every day. I mean, I think in the last 5 years, I've been approached for at least 100 of them. And on the treatment side, we're also taking advantage of advances in general in the world and in our hospital in particular, when we're looking at what we call system biology. For those who are familiar, it's called the omics world, though some of you might be familiar with the word genomics, all right? But instead of looking at one protein that is changing or one gene that is affecting behavior or the brain, we're looking at the whole system of proteins, of genes, of the way the genes express themselves on our participants. Arnon, when he spoke, he mentioned that Israel has socialized medicine. And what comes together with this socialized medicine that converges socialized medicine with the technology is that the medical charts of the electronic medical charts of Israeli people are unbelievable, all right? So some of our HMOs, our health insurance organizations, they have data on every single piece of medical information a patient has for over 20 years. So we have about 2,500 participants who are very, very well characterized medically for 22 or more years, on whom we're applying all the technologies I mentioned before and the exams of their system biology to try to discover the very earliest symptoms and the biological changes that might be treated to stop those symptoms from happening. I think I'm going to stop here. And I have one more thing, if I'm allowed. I'm not absolutely sure, but I think that Diana Nasser, she's the president of the SHEBA Friends in Brazil. I believe she is in our audience right now.
Yes, she is.
If she is, I just want to mention that she's absolutely wonderful and that she and her group have done wonderful things for the hospital creatively, constructively, and we're very, very thankful. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Professor Michal. Great talk. And I hope to keep collaborating in the future.
Sure.
OCT is my special. Eduardo, please.
Thanks, Professor Michal. Thanks, Professor Arnon, for the overview, the excellent overview and explanation that Israel doing against COVID-19. Thanks, Professor Claudio Lottenberg, for the overview to Brazil. And now I want to move the word for our chairman of the board of our group LIDE and former Ministry of Export Development, Minister Luis Fernando Furlan. Minister, thanks to be with us. And if you have some consideration or question for this very important.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm listening and learning about these issues. My background is not related to medicine. So at this time, even knowing Israel, I've been there several times, including visiting Technion and some other institutions of research, but not in the area of medicine. So my warm welcome to all the participants today. and I will keep paying attention for the outcome. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Minister. If Fabio wants to say some question for our inviters.
I'm waiting for questions from the audience also, but while they don't come, you can ask through the chat or through elsewhere. But I would like to hear from Professor Afek and also from Professor Michal, but I think Professor Afek was more involved. The measures that Israel took, like the Corona hotels and the measures of regionalized lockdown using the cell phone surveillance. It's a little bit controversial, but I think that Israel faced Corona like a war, definitely, and I think that's the way to go. And I think that's why Israel had the results it had. And I would like to, Professor Arnon, please share the screens also. If Yoel or Evan or people that can contribute, you're open to join us also.
Well, you are absolutely right. I will speak about the advantages, but also give a certain warning regarding this use. Israel has, unfortunately, a lot of experience in dealing with emergency situations. So what the government did is first recruit the different defense forces to the help of the healthcare system. And which meant, for example, for the international effort to buy more ventilation machines and things like that, and protective gears and masks and whatever necessary, and drugs. And because we are a small country relative, of course, to your huge country power, so we use all of our effort in order to buy what we were needing. Second, the military in Israel is very ingenious in inventing things, so they came to our help. I didn't mention it before because I didn't have time, but at SHEBA we have an innovation center, which is called ARC. And to this ARC volunteered so many people who were outside, who were working, and now without work, so they came and volunteered, including from the special units of the Israeli Defense Forces. And I'll give you just one example. We have a third-year resident in orthopedic surgery who sort of thought, well, I see it's very hard to get ventilatory machines, so why don't I do something different? For example, take a non-invasive ventilation, which we call BPAP, and transform it into a ventilation machine. And some of his friends from the intelligence forces used, and they worked together, and we ended up with just transforming 100 BPAPs into ventilation machines, which were, fortunately, we didn't have to use them. But that's one example. The second example is, of course, is using all these innovations like telemedicine, and people, for example, all these startup companies came to us with different ideas. And again, we use them first to protect our stuff, so through camera, and people start checking themselves. And we have robots who went within the department, so people can check the patient without their lungs, without our need to put our stuff to endanger our stuff. So this is the second issue. And the third issue, which was already raised, is the use of telemedicine. And with that, again, I think people are very, very flexible and adopt very quickly new technology. So even our, I would say, more experienced and older physician got into using telemedicine. And for example, in our cancer ward, in our cancer hospital, more than 50% of the ambulatory clinic was transformed into telemedicine, which is a large number, not to speak about places like diabetes clinic, which more than 90% became done through telemedicine. And regarding the using your cell phone to follow up people, well, it's not unique to Israel. You know that China and Hong Kong did the same. Israel, though, is a democratic country, and there were a huge concern about the fact that people will know where I am, who did I meet. The advantages for the healthcare system are quite obvious. In order to, instead of putting many people together into quarantine, we'll know who was in close contact with a person with corona. We'll know where this person was, the other person were, how long they were together, because you can know all of that from the position of your iPhone, where you were, what you did, whom you met, and how long you were in closer contact at 2 meters, for example. So this type of surveillance system was put. The Supreme Court of the country of Israel said that it will allow it to continue only if the parliament will set up a committee that will control and give permissions to the different security agencies to control it. So now they are still allowed, but I think within a week or two they will not be allowed to. But still, it's an important tool that was used. The last question you asked was about the Corona hotel. So because we had more than 6,000 or 8,000 at the same time of active Corona patients, there were some of them stayed at home care. And again, the healthcare funds, we have a very strong community system, took care of them in their homes, using all these telemedicine. They studied their oxygen saturation, the fever, they escorted their lung, all in their home using telemedicine. The second part was about people who had to be isolated and did not have their facilities in their home. For example, the Orthodox religious, they live in a very, very cramped cities, not enough space. Think of a family with 10 kids, and that's regular among Orthodox Jews. So one of them gets sick. It's impossible to stay in their own home. So they had a designated hotels run by the Ministry of Defense, and they put people who were positive and couldn't stay at their home. And these hotels, they were called Corona hotels. They of course, they have many stories of what was done in these hotels, socially speaking, but they are not for sick people, just for people who need to be isolated. This is an isolation for their disease, especially if they come from overcrowded places. And the last things, these crowded cities, like the religious cities, I had the great opportunity to visit your wonderful country, not enough, of course. I was in Rio, in Manaus, in the Salvador de Bahia, looking for what I read as young of George Amado's wonderful books. So I saw a little bit of Brazil and the Pavelot. So this is very crowded areas. This is the same thing that has to do with Maybach. So the army took control of these places to support the families, and they brought food to these families. So all of Israel became one unit in supporting and fighting the corona. This is part of the reason for the relative success.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Afek, Eduardo, Sebastian.
Thanks, Professor Arnon. I want to invite Dr. Flávio Vieira. He's our president of Health Committee of LIDE Rio Grande do Sul and chairman of the Unimed. Unimed is a health insurance and medical cooperative, big in our region. Dr. Flávio, what is your considerations? And if you have some questions about the strategies implemented in Brazil for Dr. Claudio Lottenberg.
I think Claudio has talked about important things that you have to do in Brazil, but we aren't do these things. Here in Porto Alegre, especially in Unimed, we don't have a hospital. And we only have another hospitals in our in our group. like Moinhos de Vento, Mãe de Deus, but we don't have now hospital. So we can talk about these politics in hospitals here.
Doutor Flávio, se tem alguma pergunta para o Cláudio?
No, I have no questions.
But I can have an answer if you want, Eduardo.
I have a question to Dr. Claudio.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Claudio. If you can answer some.
Okay, Fabio, go ahead, Fabio.
Dr. Claudio, are you aware of our plan from Rio Grande do Sul for our state, the controlled distancing? Because the main challenge in Israel and elsewhere is also how to come down from the tree. We all came up to the tree of the social distancing, and now coming down from the tree is the main challenge. And I think that Rio Grande do Sul gathered a very interesting strategy with different flagging according to the epidemiology, the incidence, and the bed availability. And this strategy was put in place. And I don't know if you are aware of this strategy and what can you tell me, and what I can tell about the São Paulo strategy, because you are in very different reality from us, but you know the winter is coming and the situation is very dynamic, unfortunately.
Listen, I do not have details about what is going to happen in Rio Grande do Sul, but what I can tell is that yesterday I saw exactly that you're going to start to have some living of the isolation according to some criteria. But when I ask that I want to talk is because what are my complaints in our country? First, we are not discussing about levels of complexity. We just saw people in Israel discussing BPAP, and we almost don't need to use BPAP here. We know that BPAP for low complexity cases that you have some kind of pneumonia could be useful, since you take care in avoid that is going to have some dispersion of the virus in the environment. But it's much easier to have somebody who is going to be under a BPAP compared to somebody who is going to be with a ventilator. So we are not discussing exactly protocols and how to adopt what is going to be exactly necessary for that group of patients. Something that it's a pity. This is something that could be more uniform according to the whole country. And probably we wouldn't be so disturbed about having more ventilators. The second point that we also missed is the point regarding the use of cell phones, not only to find people, but to have some data, some information. It doesn't have to be a smartphone. It can be a single phone. And just making very few questions through SMS, we would be able to know about the age, the risk factors, and also where these people are located. And according to maps, heat maps that we can do, we could establish different policies to different parts of the country, something that we lost. By the same time, with this kind of information, it would be possible for us to use much more artificial intelligence in a way to take decisions much faster and much more specific, according to what I said in the very beginning. We have a different country inside with many different countries. The reality that you can observe in Rio Grande do Sul is different to what we have here in São Paulo. We also missed a lot of opportunities in the hotels that are empty. I think that the same situation that we have in São Paulo, we have in Rio, you have in Rio Grande do Sul. And we say, listen, if you are positive, put aside this patient inside of one specific room. How many houses we have with people that are living with many rooms? So these people that are risk population, we could have brought them to live inside of the hotels, what be which would be safer and much less expensive than having to request for intensive care unit beds. We are losing a lot of time discussing about testing. Many countries, you see everything that you develop in Israel and also in some countries in Asia, it was possible to be done because they decided to test. And today it's impossible. If you're going to check and ask how many patients did the test, you're not going to be able to answer this question. It's impossible. They say about millions, suddenly comes to you about 500,000, even something so simple. And we are missing a lot because of very bad communication. I'm not just going to repeat what is happening about the behavior of the president of the country, but even the Ministry of Health Affairs is not able to communicate properly what we have to do, and trying to leave a message of something very uniform in a country that is not such uniform. I read something about Rio Grande do Sul. I don't know exactly. Here in São Paulo, we are trying to establish some way how to live and to put people to work. And we are taking into consideration what are the most vulnerable population, what is the most vulnerable economic activities, how many beds we had close to this population, and if these people, they have already done their tests. And according to these things, we are trying to create a map to establish how to start and how to continue monitoring, because we cannot put people just to work instead of and thinking that we don't have to follow these people, because we know, matter of fact, very few about the behavior of this virus.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Claudio. Great.
Fabio, I can do one question for Professor for Israel and for Brazil. The challenge now is a balance to economy and health. Here in Brazil, we have so many stories. Companies start to fire people, and some start to broke. How can you balance this question to stay to put the people on the streets or start to doing the business and stay safe with health? First of all, for Israel, and after you can do this explanation for Brazil. Professor Arnon, please, or Professor Michal.
So I can give you my answer, and I've been asked about it a lot. I think that during the beginning, once we tried to flatten the curve and to control the epidemic, the healthcare system was put in front, and we, in many ways, did isolation, very severe isolation measures, which caused a huge unemployment, which now is a huge danger to our economy as it is throughout the world. So we must take risk. And that's what I'm saying. We should take risk. We must take risk in order to bring back at least part of our economy. And we are willing to do so. But it depends largely on two processes that must take place. The first one is continuing preparation of the healthcare system. Now it's a time to give us more positions to have more staff, to use the time in order to prepare them for the next winter. So this is one part. The second issue is the behavior of the people. And these Israelis are not very disciplined people. It's not like you go to China, to Hong Kong, and you see that everyone wears a mask. We must continue social distancing. And in order to do so, people must carry their mask, keep hygiene, not try to avoid being large numbers together. And this needs a lot of explanations and convicting the public. We are not a very disciplined people, so I see the big problem. And the third thing is you have to control very, very quickly each area which you have starting of epidemic, that's like is being done right now in South Korea, when in their nightclubs they have now a coming back of epidemic. So we must be able to do so also in Israel. Once we see an area where there is the epidemic is coming up, it should be immediately isolated. Everyone must be checked and take care of that. There is also the issue of serological testing, which is another part to know who's, although we are not for sure that those who are even IgG positive are really protected, but still it will be very, very interesting to know the level of people who are now at least healed from corona and are IgG positive, to see if we are starting to have some sort of herd immunity. I spoke with the Minister of Health of Lombardia, and they, in their place where there was a huge epidemic, they believe that it will be between 10% to 30% in the worst areas. So it's not enough for herd immunity. So all of these measures must be taken together in order to try to control a second wave of epidemic, and to prevent it, and to put all our attention into reviving our economy.
Thank you.
Dr. Claudio, you can explain this challenge for Brazil, the balance to economy and health, and how can we can do for this question? I don't know if Dr. Claudio.
I'm back. I think that Furlan was talking.
Oh yeah, Furlan, is that?
When the boss speaks, we have to obey. Go ahead, Furlan. I'm going to be ready to answer whatever you want. Don't ask me about meat, but about other things you can ask me.
My dear friend, my question is related to telemedicine. How Israel is improving now with the COVID-19, the telemedicine, because in Brazil, I see that there is a very fast improvement in this area. I would like to hear your comments on that. Thank you, Claudio.
Claudio, you can hear us?
Claudio? Dr. Claudio?
My question is related to Israel.
Yes, I thought that he was asking to people from Israel, but I can answer it if you want, because our system, Fabio, we started here in Albert Einstein because of something that I observed in Israel. I had a chance to visit, I don't remember exactly what hospital, but I could realize that we have very few children in the emergency room. And I spoke to people of telemedicine many years ago, and they said, listen, we started with telemedicine here, and we could realize that just 1/3 of the patients, since they did the first call, they used to come to visit our emergency room. And taking into consideration this 1/3, 1/3 of them, they were admitted in the hospitals. What means that when you have something serious, the people, they look for you because they need you. What is the message for Furlan? People, they are not looking at an emergency room because something that is an emergency. They need some kind of support. They need to talk with somebody. They need some information. And the moment that you offer a channel that can open an opportunity to discuss this kind of doubt, people, they feel supported. If you compare the NPS that you have in the emergency room to what you have in the telemedicine, telemedicine is much higher, is much better. And patients that they use telemedicine, normally after 2 months, they repeat, 75% of them, they repeat the experience because it's much faster, it's much more simple. It doesn't mean that they are not looking for a doctor physically, but they have the answer for that purpose that they need. I understand that this good example that comes from Israel is because Israel is deeply involved in terms of technology, because they can do much more. I was in Israel 3 months ago before COVID, and I had a chance to visit. I don't know if Fabio is familiar to this, and Sebastian probably not because he's not a doctor. But I saw an app. The name is Bina. Because of face recognition, they are able to measure your breath frequency, your frequency of the heart, levels of glucose in your temperature. Suppose that you have this gadget to be used at home by a patient, and what it could be useful in terms of the relationship to give to the patient more support and something safer in terms of put him in the right channel. The point on healthcare for Lan is that everything starts in the hospital. What makes you to spend much more money than it's necessary? So telemedicine, I think, is a way that comes from Israel and comes from other countries, and we cannot stop this. Just for this moment can be a breakthrough.
Great.
Thank you.
Eduardo?
Oi.
Flávio. Posso falar?
Okay. Fala.
We are beginning telemedicine in Unimed Porto Alegre in this week, only in this week. But we agree with Claudio. The great problem is that we have a great resistance among physicians. And about the economy, in Unimed Porto Alegre, now we have an increase of companies that can't continuously pay for our service. And this is a great problem in all of the country.
Excellent.
Okay.
Professor Arnon, to continue this question of Minister Furlan, can you continue about this telemedicine? Tell us about the hackathon. It is a very innovative measure that SHEBA did, the COVID hackathon of the IRC. But I think it's very interesting for the audience to know.
Oh, thank you very much for the question. So we understand that there is always an importance in sharing knowledge with the younger generation, because they are much prone and they have wonderful ideas. And if you are being, in many ways, informal and support them, you might get wonderful ideas. So what we did is we opened, and we have our innovation center. The innovation center was built in SHEBA before the corona, and the idea was to keep how can we manage and keep the best young physicians and nurses in SHEBA. So we said, look, what we will do is we'll open an innovation center. We'll give money to young startups, so they will do their startup within the hospital. Then we brought also companies and universities from all over the world, including, for example, Microsoft and Mayo Clinic and Brigham and Women from the States, and different hospitals, universities, companies, and in order to let startups from both our hospitals and from outside to come and use mainly our data in order to experiment with their ideas. And we gave the money, and the idea was that if out of these 100 there will be one exit, it will give us back all the money and will support the new companies. Once started the corona, we said, okay, we'll take this infrastructure we built and we'll reopen it for new ideas regarding corona. And we opened it, and people started to bring their ideas now, and we brought the best people, which listen to people from all the time and bringing their novel ideas, things from which are regarding the different treatments, including mainly all these telemedicine appliances in order to do sensoring, using, for example, radar to screen people for fever without the need to put their thermometer to their head. People came with ideas like using the breath. You spoke before that, Michal spoke before that about using retina in order to learn about early stages of Alzheimer's. So maybe the breath in order to pick up signs for the viruses. So we had this issue. Also, we were starting to learn. So I understand that, and we did a hackathon. We listened to these ideas from the most, I would say, impossible to something which is very possible and very realistic, and try to keep our open minds. Once pick up the things we thought to be the most, the ones who look to us the most promising ones, we start helping these young people, mainly young people, but also companies, to start to develop them. And again, some of them are being done right now. Some of them are just for learning and international experience. For example, we collaborated with a group of professors and a company to learn the question whether weather is associated with less infection of the virus. We believe it is. We believe that higher temperature, higher humidity, we'll see a decrease in the effectiveness of the virus. So this was something which is more research, and other things which much more practical, like the radar and the sampling of the breath to see whether you are sick or not sick with corona, or just learning from outside what is your, I would say, glucose level or your O2 saturation. And we'll see what will come out of it.
Very nice. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Sebastian, our president, please.
We are reaching almost the end of our conversation, and I would like to thank everyone for being with us. Mr. Arnon and Michal, the Kavod Gadol she'atem itanu, Mr. Claudio Lottenberg, and I want to address to each one of you two small or not so small questions about the moment we are passing through. First question is, how far do you all think we are from a vaccine or medication that can, let's say, solve our problem? And the second question is, how do you imagine the world after the pandemic? Do you really think things are going to change? Human beings are going to be different? Or sometime after everything that's going on, we'll back to what we were in the past? Thank you once again.
Michal, you want to start?
I just want to, I'm a neuroscientist, so I want to give an answer to your second question that might not be very optimistic, but I think it's the way that our brain is wired. Our brain tends to go back to its comfort zone. So I think this, at least so far, it has been a relatively short period of time. 2 months is very suffered for many people, and we had so many losses. But yet, in terms of behavior and feelings, I think that if this goes away, and we hope it's going to go away soon, I think the tendency is going to go back to the same craziness it was just before. That's an opinion.
Maybe Yoel can answer this question.
Yeah, I'll be happy to try to answer both of your two questions. Regarding the vaccine, to be very optimistic, and there is 6 or 7 groups around the globe that working right now on a very high level of vaccination level. It should take at least, and I was very optimistic, a year until it's going to be commercialized and fully activated. But even though you need to understand that to manufacture such an amount vaccination for the mankind, it's going to take some time. So to be optimistic, at least a year, but then to reach out to all mankind and humanity, more couple of months. About the second question, how it's going to affect and change our life. definitely the world is not going to be the same, and I will try to enlighten a very narrow angle regarding going back to work, and what should industry or even banks and even hospitals should admit and prepare themselves in order to open the gates for people to come. So we, of course, we know that we need to keep isolation and 2 and 2.5 meters in counters. So it's very, very common knowledge, and sanitation. But I want to suggest another angle, which big factories and big companies will need to embed it into their system, a new subject or a new occupation, which will be between nurse or physician, who will help them to absorb and to create all those rules. Because right now, some huge factories, as a physician, just to treat the, in a small clinic to treat the staff if something is happening. But we are speaking about a different angle, which huge factories and hotels need to adjust and to monitor the staff, checking rapidly what's going on with the staff, checking about the workers and those who are coming into this bank chambers, or even to the hotels. So we need to even to create from scratch a new occupation, which is a combination of health policy, nursing, medicine, but it's a combination of all of those elements, and also infection control, disease. So it's a new subject in medicine, which is combined from all that I mentioned, which help big factories and big industrial companies to adjust and absorb the rules that are existing, and be sure there are more rules are coming in the future, because we are just in the beginning to understand what this virus is about. And as long as we will go in the future, we will, most of the people will, it's a very, imminent need to go back into normality, but leave aside and ringside to this virus is not going to leave us so soon. So we need to deal and cope with the future with the tools that we have now, but also with some of the tools that we use for AI or big data. But definitely, it's not. It won't be the same as we used to think it's going to be.
I want to add some comments. First, when I see people from SHEBA, I cannot forget Amitai Ziv. My best wishes to him. My good friend. I learn a lot with him. Do not forget, please, Joel. I like him very much.
We'll tell him.
Okay, please, Arnon. And I just read something that came from the World Health Organization chief scientist that offers a bleak assessment of challenges ahead. It will be 4 to 5 years before COVID-19 is under control. So not that simple as maybe we can imagine. But I think that this world is going to change a lot. We're going to have a more digital world, citizens that are going to be more conscious about their roles to take care of their healthcare, what doesn't happen. The world is going to be much more creative and much more objective about how to deal things. And probably you're going to have much more team working and less people that want to resolve it by themselves. So these are some inputs that I think is going to happen for the world that's going to happen soon after this period, that I hope is not going to take 4 to 5 years.
Great.
Okay. So our time is done. I want to say thanks for Professor Michal, Professor Arnold, Professor Yoel, Professor Claudio, to be with us and explain all your knowledge for this very important subject. Remembering that the content of this live will be available on our YouTube channel. I want to say many thanks for Fabio and Sebastian for this very good initiative. And I hope everything is going to be well. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you all. Thank you, Professor Afek, Professor Michal, the people from UL. Thank you very much for opening this bridge. We talked in a Sunday morning, and you believed in this meeting and make it real. Thank you very much to all your here, and it's here also. Thank you, Lydia. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you all. Bye bye.